Giwu Park walked through the bright hallways of the space station called New Geneva. Her fancy diplomatic clothes rustled as she moved toward the big meeting room where alien leaders waited. She had been doing this job for 20 years now, ever since humans first met the Zephyrian Collective. Every meeting felt like a game where the aliens made promises they never kept. The heavy doors opened with a soft whoosh sound. Inside, 12 different alien species sat in a half-circle of chairs. The Zephyrians were the most important ones. They were tall and thin with see-through skin and extra arms. Next to them sat the bug-like Kavari whose many eyes sparkled in the dim light. All the other alien types filled the rest of the seats. "Ambassador Park," said Valthera, the main Zephyrian speaker. Her voice sounded like music, which made it hard to tell when she was lying. "We hope your trip from Earth was good?" Jiwoo sat down in her chair, which was lower than all the others. This was meant to remind her that humans were still just trial. Members of the collective. Thank you, Prime Speaker. But after 20 years of these meetings, I wonder when we can talk about humans becoming full members. Some of the aliens made soft sounds that might have been laughter. Crystal, one of the bug-like Kavari, clicked his mouth parts. "You must be patient, Ambassador. Your people are very eager, but wisdom takes time." The word eager sounded like an insult. Ji-woo had heard it many times before. It was the aliens' polite way of saying humans were too dangerous and wild to be trusted. Maybe Gi-woo said carefully, but surely our work on science projects and peaceful colonies shows we want to follow collective rules. Yes, Valthara's voice stayed sickeningly sweet. But our Cultural Assessment Committee has found some worrying patterns in how humans expand. Your species tends to advance technology too fast and be too... territorial. Kiwoo felt angry but kept her face calm. Every good thing humans did was twisted into something bad. Their faster-than-light communication was called too early. Their good terraforming was too aggressive. Even their diplomatic efforts were called fake charm. As the meeting went on with the usual delays and excuses, Giwoo's brain implant buzzed with a secret message from Earth. The sender was hidden, but the words made her heart race. "The birds are singing. The nest is ready. Are you listening?" It was a code phrase she had memorized years ago, but never expected to get. Dr. Minho, Kim's research team had finally done it. Deep under the Gobi Desert, in a place that officially did not exist, Dr. Minho. Kim stood in front of a huge quantum communication machine. The device hummed with barely controlled energy, its crystal parts glowing with inner light. After 15 years of secret work, humans had finally learned how to talk instantly across the galaxy without alien spies listening. "Power levels are good," said Hai Jinli, his chief engineer. Her fingers danced over glowing controls. "We're ready for the first long-distance test." Minho nodded, but his face looked worried. The breakthrough had cost lives. 3 of his researchers had died in early experiments. Their deaths were officially blamed on accidents. The collective's technology-sharing agreement said no independent, faster-than-light research was allowed, and breaking this rule meant severe punishment. "Connect to Kepler Station," he ordered. The machine's hum got louder. Suddenly, the room filled with crackling energy from a stable wormhole communication link. On the main screen, Captain Donghyun Choi appeared clearly, even though he was 27 light-years away. "Dr. Kim," the captain's voice came through perfectly. "We're receiving you clearly. This is incredible." Minho smiled a little. "Captain, this is just the beginning. How is your construction work going?" "Ahead of schedule. The asteroid mining operation is making more raw materials than we expected. We should have the first group of ships ready in 6 months. The meeting was heavy in the room. While humans pretended to be good provisional members on the surface, they had been preparing for the inevitable betrayal. The collective's promises of coexistence had always sounded false, and careful watching had shown the truth. Humanity was being kept in a cage, not welcomed as equals. "Any word from our friend?" Minho asked, using their code for the Zephyrian. "A scientist who had been trying to contact them. He's scheduled for another research exchange next month. I think he's getting desperate to share what he knows." What? Minho's face darkened. Their alien contact's messages had become more urgent over the past year, filled with warnings about something called the Harmony Protocol. The details were still unclear, But the meaning was obvious. The collective was planning something that would fundamentally change humanity's future. Keep the channels open, Captain. I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can get. As the connection closed, Minho stared at the quantum machine. Humanity had always been told they were too young, too aggressive, too dangerous. For real galactic citizenship, perhaps it was time to prove them right. Kethver had never thought that having a conscience could feel so heavy. The Zephyrian scientist's see-through skin glowed, with nervous light patterns that showed his worried feelings as he waited in the old research building on Titan. His people could naturally blend into their surroundings, which made this secret meeting possible. But every second felt like waiting for someone to catch him. The building's air machines hummed softly, keeping the air good for both humans and Zephyrians to breathe. When the airlock door finally opened, Dr. Minho Kim came out. His spacesuit helmet folded back to show a face that looked tired from years of hidden stress. "You took a big risk coming here," Minho said, his voice echoing in the large, empty room. Kethver's main arms moved in a way that humans had learned meant he was upset. Not doing anything would be much more dangerous. Your people? You need to know what the collective really wants to do. Minho turned on a small blocking device that made a quiet humming sound to hide their talk from any spies who might be listening. "We thought the integration rules were more than they seemed. Our diplomatic talks have been blocked for years." Blocked. Kethver's skin pulsed with light that might have been bitter laughter. "Ambassador Park thinks she's dealing with slow paperwork. She has no idea that every human suggestion is immediately marked as a security threat." The truth hit Minho hard. "And the Cultural Assessment Committee is fake." Kethver cut him off. "There's no assessment. There's only the containment protocol. Your species has been marked to be slowly killed off since the first year we met." Minho felt the blood leave his face. Killed off. Pulled out a crystal data storage device that glowed with encrypted information. "It's not through war. The collective learned long ago that violence creates heroes and makes people want to fight back. The method is much more clever. The Harmony Protocol," Minho whispered, remembering the pieces of information they had stolen. "A brain modification system disguised as medical treatment. It has been tested on 3 species over the past 200 years. The Tharnok were the first warrior people, not unlike humans. They volunteered for the treatment thinking it would make them better soldiers. Within 1 generation, they became peaceful servants, their fighting spirit chemically removed." Minho's hands made fists. "You're talking about brain surgery on an entire species? Worse, the subjects stay smart and creative and capable, but their drive to be independent, their ability to rebel, their very sense of wanting to control their own lives is ... edited out. They become perfect citizens of the collective, grateful for their place in the cosmic order." The data crystal felt impossibly heavy in Minho's hand. "Why are you telling me this? Why risk everything?" Kethver's skin light dimmed to almost nothing. "Because I helped design the delivery system. I watched proud species become shadows of themselves, and I told myself it was for the greater good. But humanity, your species, reminds me of what we once were, before the collective's embrace made us forget the value of chaos." "When?" Minho asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "The final phase begins in 18 months. The Collective Council will announce that humanity has qualified for full citizenship." "No. But only if you accept the Harmony Enhancement. Your leaders will be told it's a routine medical procedure required for safe interaction with all collective species." Minho's mind raced through what this meant. Some will volunteer willingly. The outer colonies will be first. New Shanghai, Kepler. Station the Mars research facilities. Small populations eager to prove they belong in galactic society. By the time the effects become clear, it will be too late. "Not if we're ready," Minho said quietly. Kethver's eyes went wide. "You cannot fight the collective. 12 species. Thousands of worlds. We don't have to fight them all," Minho interrupted. "We just have to survive long enough to show everyone the truth." As they prepared to leave, Kethver shared one final piece of information. "There is something else. The collective's files contain records of other species ones that refused the Harmony Protocol. The Viridians were declared extinct after their refusal, but some of their outer colonies may have survived. The Saltari disappeared entirely, but their technology suggests they may have found a way to hide beyond collective space. Hidden allies, Minho thought out loud. Or warnings of what happens to those who say no. The emergency meeting of Earth's Shadow Council happened in a bunker beneath the Australian desert. The room's walls were lined with quantum dampeners, making it invisible to collective spies. President Sujin Park sat at the head of the table, her face grim as she read Kethfer's intelligence. 18 months, she said finally. That's not enough time to move all our off-world people. I don't need to move them, said Admiral Kung Ho Lee, his weathered face set with determination. We need to prepare them. Dr. Unisio Nam, the government's chief medical officer, leaned forward. The brain modifications described in these files, they're not permanent. Hard to fix? Yes, but not impossible. If we can develop a treatment. ... That's a big if, President Park replied. And it assumes we can identify the infected before they become willing participants in their own mental slavery. The first sign of betrayal did not come from soldiers or diplomats, but from a desperate message sent by a young mother on New Shanghai Colony. Dr. Yunyung had signed up her family for the Harmony Enhancement Program because she believed the collectives. Promises that it would help her children succeed in galactic society. 6 months later, she stood in front of a quantum communication machine in the colony's medical center. Her eyes were empty of everything that had once made her human. When she spoke, her voice was flat and emotionless in a way that had become terrifyingly familiar. To the Resistance, people watching. Earth Command. This is Dr. O of New Shanghai Medical. I'm happy to report that the Harmony Enhancement has been successfully put in place across our population. We experience amazing peace and cooperation. All forms of aggressive behavior have been removed. We request that Earth begin immediate preparation for system-wide implementation. The message ended, leaving the monitoring station on Luna Base in shocked silence. Communications Officer Jin Woo Park stared at the blank screen, his hands shaking. As he tried to understand what he had just seen, "Did you know her?" asked Captain Sang-Hoon Kim, the station's commanding officer. "She was my sister," Jin Woo said quietly. "She had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. They were so full of life." More reports flooded in over the following weeks. Mars Research Station, Kepler Colony, the mining operations in the Alpha Centauri system. Each message carried the same soulless confirmation of the Harmony Protocol's success. Thousands of humans turned into willing servants of the collectives. Vision. On Earth, the Shadow Council met in emergency session. The holographic displays showed the spreading infection across humanity's off-world colonies. Like a cancer of compliance that threatened to eat everything that made their species unique. "The evacuation fleets are on their way," Admiral Lee reported, his voice tight with held-back fury. "But the infected populations are actively fighting rescue efforts. They believe we're trying to harm them." President Park's hands clenched into fists as she watched footage from the failed evacuation of Kepler's station. Human colonists, their faces calm and empty, had formed human shields around the collective's medical facilities. Some had even picked up weapons against their own species' rescue ships. "What about the countermeasure research?" she asked. Dr. Nam's face was grim.
We've made progress.
"But the modifications are more complex than we first thought. The collective doesn't just suppress aggressive behavior, they rebuild the entire brain framework for making decisions. The infected subjects aren't just peaceful, they're completely unable to question authority, meaning even if we develop a perfect cure, the subjects would refuse to take it. It would see our attempt to help them as an act of violence." Against their newfound harmony, the cruel genius of the collective's approach became clear. They hadn't just created a weapon, they'd created a weapon that made its victims grateful for their slavery. Ambassador Giwoo Park stood before the assembled collective council, her diplomatic immunity, the only thing preventing her immediate arrest. The chamber's atmosphere had changed dramatically since her last visit. Where once there had been condescending politeness, now there was barely hidden hostility. "The Harmony Protocol was never part of our agreement," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber with unwavering authority. Humanity agreed to cultural integration, not brain modification. Prime Speaker Valthara's response was delivered with the same musical tones, but the underlying message was clear. Ambassador Park, your species has benefited greatly from collective guidance. The enhancement program is simply the next step in your evolution toward galactic citizenship. Evolution? Gi Wu's voice carried a note of incredulous anger. You're talking about lobotomy. You're talking about the systematic destruction of human consciousness. We're talking about peace, said Crystal of the Kavari. Your species' aggressive tendencies pose a threat to galactic stability. The enhancement program eliminates this threat while preserving your species' valuable qualities. Gi Wu activated her personal recording device, broadcasting her words across every human communication network in the galaxy. Let me be clear. For the record, the Zephyrian Collective has unilaterally decided to implement forced brain modification on human populations. This is not medical treatment. This is mental slavery disguised as progress. The chamber erupted in alien voices, but Ji Wu continued. To every human listening to this transmission, the Collective's promises of coexistence were lies. They never intended to accept us as equals. They intended to remake us into servants. Valthara's skin flared with angry light. Ambassador Park, you are hereby stripped of diplomatic immunity. Your species has 48 hours to submit to system-wide enhancement implementation, or face the consequences of your defiance. And what consequences are those? Ji Wu asked, though she already knew the answer. Pacification fleets are already on their way to Earth, and your remaining colonies. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. Gi Wu smiled grimly. You know, Prime Speaker, you're absolutely right about one thing. Humanity does have aggressive tendencies. We have a particular hatred for bullies and slavers. You're about to discover exactly how aggressive we can be. The Collective's first pacification fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, expecting to find a panicked and disorganized human resistance. Instead, they found Admiral Lee's task force waiting for them in perfect formation. The rescue of New Shanghai Colony became a turning point in ways no one had expected. Captain Yanju Kim led the strike team through the colony's clean hallways, her heart breaking with each person they met. The colonists moved like robots, their faces blank and peaceful as they tried to stop the violent attack of their own species. Target the medical center, she ordered her team. Dr. Nam's countermeasures need to be put directly into the air systems. The resistance was heartbreaking in how useless it was. Former friends and co-workers stood in their path, not with weapons, but with their own bodies, completely convinced that the humans were bringing chaos to their perfect world. Sergeant Min Jun Lee found himself face-to-face with his own brother, a mining engineer who had volunteered for the enhancement program. Dongjun Min Jun begged, "It's me, it's your brother. We're here to help you." Dongshun's response was delivered with the same flat tone they'd all learned to recognize. "You are wrong. I have no need of help. The Collective has provided all necessary guidance for optimal living. Your presence creates disharmony." The brain restoration process, when it began, was both amazing and terrifying. As Dr. Nam's countermeasures flooded the colony's air, the modified humans began to shake violently. Their bodies fought against the restoration of their suppressed brain pathways. And many didn't survive the process, but those who did. Dr. Yunyon Oh was among the first to recover, her consciousness flooding back like a dam breaking. The memories of her time under the Harmony Protocol stayed intact, but now she could see them for what they truly were, a waking nightmare of willing slavery. "My children," she gasped, her eyes wide with horror. "What did I do to my children?" Mental trauma was as devastating as the physical damage. The recovered colonists remembered everything, every moment of their willing compliance. Every decision made in service to their captors, every feeling of gratitude for their own enslavement. The suicide rate among the recovered was devastating. The Collective's response to the liberation attempts was swift and brutal. Fleetmaster Zerthik of the Kavari led the second wave of pacification forces, his compound eyes reflecting the cold fury of an empire that had never been seriously challenged. The humans have violated every principle of galactic law, he buzzed to his assembled commanders. They have attacked peaceful colonies, disrupted lawful medical procedures, and incited rebellion among our subject species. The time for restraint has ended. The Battle of Kepler Station lasted 14 hours and changed the nature of galactic warfare forever. The collective brought their full military might to bear dreadnoughts that had pacified 1,000 worlds, weapons that could crack planets, shields that had never been broken. Captain Donghayan Choi commanded the human defense, his ships outnumbered 50-1. But the humans had advantages the collective had never encountered: desperation, innovation, and a complete willingness to die rather than surrender. All ships implement pattern Omega, he ordered. Let's show them what happens. When you corner a predator species, the human ships attacked with a savagery that shocked the collective forces. They rammed enemy vessels when their weapons failed, used their own destroyed ships as kinetic weapons, and fought with a tactical unpredictability that turned the collective's numerical advantage into a liability. Commander Hai-Young Park sacrificed her ship and crew in a kamikaze run that took out 3 collective dreadnoughts. Her final transmission became a rallying cry for the resistance. Tell Earth we held the line. Tell them we made them pay. When the battle ended, the collective fleet was in retreat, but the cost had been enormous. Half the human fleet was destroyed, and Kepler Station was a gutted wreck. But the message was clear. Humanity would not go. Quietly, the ripple effects of human resistance spread across the galaxy like a virus. On Tharnakai, war leader Gorthak received reports that stirred his warrior's heart. The humans fight like our ancestors did, reported scout leader Kethmer. They show no mercy, ask for no quarter, and prefer death to dishonor. The collective's fleets are learning to fear them. Then it is time, Gorthak declared. Send word to all hidden clans. The great resistance begins now. Tharnak emergence was swift and devastating. Thought extinct for over a century, the unmodified survivors had spent generations preparing for this moment. Their ships, hidden in asteroid fields and dead worlds, struck at collective supply lines with the fury of a people who had watched their species below below. But it was the Viridians who provided the war's most crucial advantage. Their mastery of dimensional technology allowed them to appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Prime Singer Valandra led her people's ships through folded space, striking at the very heart of the collective's power structure. The humans have given us something we had lost, she sang to her fellow commanders. They have reminded us that freedom is worth dying for. The Soltari contribution was more subtle but equally devastating. Their dimensional broadcasts carried the truth about the Harmony Protocol to every corner of the galaxy, breaking through the collective's information monopoly. Species that had willingly submitted to enhancement began to question their choices. The Collective Council convened an emergency session on Zephyr Prime, their usual calm shattered by reports of rebellion spreading across 12 sectors. The final solution protocol began with the systematic destruction of rebel worlds. Fleetmaster Zerthik led the extermination fleets with the cold efficiency of someone who believed they were performing a necessary amputation. The first target was Tharnakai, the hidden world where the warrior species had made their last stand. War leader Gorthak stood on the bridge of his flagship as the collective armada dropped out of hyperspace. 3,000 ships, more firepower than had ever been assembled in galactic history, all focused on wiping his people from existence. All clans he broadcast across the Tharnak fleet. Today we die as our ancestors lived free and fighting. Let the galaxy remember that we never knelt.
Out!
The Battle of Tharnakai lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the warrior species was extinct. But they had taken nearly a third of the collective's fleet with them. Zerthek's report to the council was grim. The rebels are not merely fighting for survival. They are fighting for the right to choose their own fate. This makes them exponentially more dangerous than standard pacification targets. But the collective's Pyrrhic victory was short-lived. Admiral Kung Ho Lee had been preparing for this moment, and humanity's response was swift and devastating. Operation Endgame is authorized, he announced to his fleet commanders. All restrictions are lifted. We're no longer fighting for coexistence. We're fighting for the right of every species to exist as they choose. The human fleet that came out of the asteroid belt was unlike anything seen before in galactic warfare, Captain SEO Jun Park commanded. The new flagship Prometheus, a vessel that used technology from every rebel species. Tharnak weapons, Viridian dimensional drives, Soltari reality manipulation systems, all coordinated by quantum AI networks that had evolved beyond their original programming. Target: Zephyr Prime, Admiral Lee announced. We're going to the source. The journey to the collective's capital world took 3 weeks, but the fleet's passage left a trail of liberated worlds in its wake. On each planet, the human neural restoration technology was deployed, breaking the Harmony Protocol's hold on billions of minds. Dr. Younes Onem, now serving as Fleet Medical Officer, watched the liberation of Kavari Prime with mixed emotions. The insectoid species recovery was particularly difficult. Their hive mind structure made them more susceptible to the Harmony modifications, but also more likely to recover in massive groups. It's like watching an entire civilization wake up from a nightmare, she reported to Admiral Lee. The mental trauma is severe, but their anger is beautiful. The Kavari who recovered from the enhancement protocol were not the same people who had submitted to it. They were harder, more suspicious, but also more determined. Hive Queen Clixandra led her people's ships alongside the human fleet, her compound eyes burning with the fire of someone who had experienced slavery and chosen freedom. The collective taught us the value of unity, she buzzed to her human allies. But they forgot that unity without choice is just another form of death. Siege of Zephyr Prime became the stuff of legend. The collective's homeworld was defended by every remaining ship in their fleet, protected by planetary shields that had never been broken, supported by the mental energy of billions of modified citizens who would willingly die for their oppressors. Captain Yanju Kim led the first wave of assault ships through the planetary defenses. Her ship, Indomitable, carving a path through the enemy formations. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. Not just a clash of weapons, but a battle for the very soul of galactic civilization. The shields are adapting to our weapons, reported Commander Heiwan Zhou from the tactical station. They're using the collective mental energy of the modified population to reinforce their defenses. Admiral Lee's response was characteristic of the man who had spent his career preparing for impossible odds. Then we give them something they can't adapt to. All ships implement Protocol Omega. We're going to show them what happens when you try to cage the human spirit. Protocol Omega was humanity's final gambit, a coordinated assault that used the fleet's quantum AI networks to create a resonance cascade in the planetary shields. The technique was theoretically possible, but practically suicidal, requiring the ships to operate in perfect synchronization while under maximum enemy fire. Captain Gong Hein Choi led his squadron in the final assault, his ship's hull glowing with the heat of energy discharge. For everyone who died free, he broadcast. For everyone who chose to fight rather than kneel, the shields fell. The battle for Zephyr Prime's surface was fought building by building, with human marines facing off against collective security forces and modified civilians who genuinely believed they were defending paradise. Lieutenant Colonel Buara, you led her troops through the capital city's gleaming spires, deploying neural restoration devices as they advanced. The sight of modified Zephyrians recovering their free will was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Many collapsed in horror as they realized what they had become, but others joined the fight with the fury of the newly awakened Prime Speaker, Velthera. Made her final stand in the collective council chamber, surrounded by the last of her loyal guards. When Admiral Lee finally confronted her, she was no longer the serene diplomat who had once condescended to humanity. You have doomed the galaxy, she hissed, her bioluminescence flickering with desperate rage. Without the collective's guidance, chaos will consume everything. Maybe Lee replied calmly, but it will be our chaos to choose.
Ow!
The formal surrender came 3 days later. The collective's remaining leadership, many of them recovered from their own modified states, signed the Galactic Liberation Accords. The document was simple in its scope. Every species would have the right to exist as they chose, free from external manipulation or control. Ambassador Gi-Woo Park, now serving as the first human galactic chancellor, delivered the closing address. To the Reformed Council, representatives from dozens of species, many thought extinct, others newly awakened, filled the chamber. "We offered friendship," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the galaxy. "You chose subjugation. We promised consequences. Consider the debt paid." The new galactic order was far from perfect. The psychological trauma of the enhancement protocol would take generations to heal. Some species chose isolation, while others embraced chaotic freedom with destructive enthusiasm. Wars broke out between former collective members seeking revenge against their oppressors. But in the midst of the chaos, something beautiful emerged. Art, music, literature, and philosophy flourished as minds freed from the Harmony Protocol began to explore the full spectrum of existence. The galaxy became messy, unpredictable, and wonderfully alive. Dr. Minho Kim, now elderly but still sharp, stood in his laboratory on Earth, watching the quantum communication arrays carry messages of hope and defiance across the stars. His life's work had been to ensure humanity's survival, but he had given the galaxy something far more precious: the right to choose its own destiny. "The birds are singing," he whispered to himself, remembering the code phrase that had started it all. "And they're singing their own songs.